Start the webinar officially now. So on behalf of IET Sri Lanka Network, I welcome all of you. I am Dr. Lalit Liyanage, Chairman IET Sri Lanka Network. So we have a very interesting session waiting ahead of us. We have three eminent presenters we have lined up for today's session. As I initially said, the idea was Professor KKYW Pereira in the January committee meeting, and we had a lot of discussions to bring the session into this stage with Engineer Shavi, Dr. Tilak, and Engineer Lakshita. And let me bring out some background. The Sri Lankan government aims to be an energy self-sufficient, as you all know, nation by 2030, with the aim of 70% renewable energy. So Sri Lanka has already achieved a grid connectivity of 98%. These are facts, which is relatively high by South Asian standards. In the global situation, we see, I found in the literature that in 2019, almost 16% of global primary energy came from low carbon sources. So you all know low carbon sources are the sum of nuclear energy and renewables, which includes hydropower, wind, solar, bioenergy, geothermal, and wave and tidal. 11.4% came from renewables and 4.3% came from nuclear. In parallel to Sri Lanka, there is a huge trend globally also to moving into renewables. So you will learn from our experts, other statistics and the global context, local context, everything. I'm not the expert. As you must be aware, IET was until 2006, IEE, Institute of Electrical Engineers. So still we have a majority of our members in the field of electrical and electronic specialties. So this may be the reason why as IET Sri Lanka Network, we have taken the power and energy subject very seriously. And we have organized many forums during past for the public over last many years. Among them, the latest such occasions were in 2020, we had a seminar on challenges imposed by inverter-based generation, IBG, on power systems and Australians' approach to mitigate them. Why Australia? One of our, I think, Moratua graduates, Moratua engineer Dhanushka Suryadasa, who is now in Australia working for the Australian energy market operator as operations planning engineer. So he brought out all his experience and how Australia is doing in terms of IBG on power systems. And then in 2021, we had a seminar on pros and cons of nuclear power on Sri Lanka's journey towards carbon neutrality by 2050. This was done by, you all know, Professor Anura Vijayapala from University of Moratua. So likewise, IET Sri Lanka Network has been actively engaged in this subject area. So this is a small overview. Before I go into today's discussion, the synopsis gave to me by the presenters was, in this presentation, they will take you through various stages of development of generation plan. The presentation will cover the plans CB produced from 2015 to the current 2022-2041 plan. So they will not only present the plans, but also will critically evaluate the plans present in the pros and cons. So they will touch upon the CB strategy for RE transition and carbon neutrality at a more practical and optimized approach. They will also elaborate as to how the new 70% policy will impact on the economy. Finally, the presentation will remind the listeners on the communications between the government and the PUCSL on this matter over the past several years. So PUCSL is very active these days. You all see every day on news, the CB seeking approval for power cuts, and PUCSL is giving, not giving. And this is high time we discuss this topic because we all are experiencing these power cuts. And even today's session, there can be, disturbances from somewhere. I don't know whether I will have power cuts, whether presenters will have power cuts, whether you all as the audience will have power cut. But anyway, we are recording this session and directly archiving on cloud so that there will be no disturbances in the recording, right? So the presentations will be followed up with a panel discussion, which will be moderated by Dr. Tilak Siyambalapitiya, who is one of the most recognized engineers, both in Sri Lanka and overseas. And at the end of the seminar, the IET intends to present the outcome of the session to the, if possible, to the president, the main discussion points, and to open a policy dialogue in order to bring together the engineers, technocrats, and the decision makers to one platform to bring out a viable, economically optimal, and environmentally acceptable generation plan to shape the future generation mix so that we will not have problems like today. With that, let me introduce the two presenters. First, the first presenter is Engineer Lakshita Veerasinghe. He has graduated in 1994 from University of Moratuwa with a first-class honors degree in electrical engineering and also holds a Master of Philosophy degree from University of Peradeniya. He is a corporate member of the Institute of Engineers Sri Lanka. He counts over 27 years of experience as an engineer, which includes 2 years in the private sector and 25 years in the CEB. He has experience in hydropower generation, power system operations, electricity tariffs, and is currently holding the post of Deputy General Manager, Transmission and Generation Planning of CEB. So you know now why we have selected Engineer Lakshita as our first presenter. And then we have another eminent engineer, Engineer Shavindranath Fernando, graduated from University of Sri Lanka, Katubedda campus in 1978. He earned M.Eng in Energy Technology from AIT, Asian Institute of Technology, in 1982. His entire career was in CB in generation, alternate energy development, generation planning, generation and transmission projects. He retired as the GM CB, the topmost position. He was appointed as the chairman, National Engineering Research and Development Center, NERD Center, in 2016. He's a visiting lecturer in many universities. He was awarded the Distinguished AIT Alumni in 2004 and was inducted to the AIT Hall of Fame in 2019. So you can see now why we have two very eminent, very professional engineers to present our case. And I will introduce Dr. Tilak at the end of the presentation before he starts his panel discussion. The game rules are everyone should switch off the cameras and mics while the presentation is progressing. And you may raise your questions in the chat box. And during the during the panel discussion, either you may continue to raise your questions in the chat box or use the hand raise icon, and when the moderator lets you ask your question, you may do so, right? And I must mention we have very eminent audience as well. Professor KKYW Pereira is with us. Mr. Subair, who was also, I think, chairman or GM at CB, very senior and IET past president, past chairman. And I saw Dr. Asanka Rodrigo from Moratuwa University, who is also a regular presenter for IET, who is conducting the IET wiring regulations for us. And likewise, we have many eminent engineers. I saw Dhammika Nanayakar, past chairman of IET Sri Lanka. So I welcome all of you for this interesting session. with this note, I hand over the session to the first presenter, Engineer Lakshita Veerasinghe. He will hand over the baton to Engineer Shavi for the presentation. So over to you, engineers.